They thought it was just a message of fear. A gang of ruthless men, fueled by arrogance and hate, chose to target a black woman who lived quietly at the edge of their neighborhood. To them, she was powerless, an easy mark. So one night, in a cruel display of dominance, they took the only companion she cherished, her loyal dog. But what they never realized was that their act of cruelty had awakened something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Because this woman was not just a victim. She was a former Delta Force commander, trained in the shadows of war, and now, her fury was coming for them. For years, Cassandra Hayes had lived in quiet anonymity. To the world, she was just another middle-aged black woman renting a modest house on the outskirts of town. She kept to herself, spending her mornings jogging with her dog, Shadow, and her evenings tending a small garden in her backyard. Neighbors saw her as polite but reserved, never prying into her past. Few knew that she had once worn the uniform of the nation's most elite unit, Delta Force, and fewer still could imagine the battles she had fought in silence, both abroad and at home. The neighborhood she called home had been crumbling under the grip of a violent gang. Their graffiti marked every wall. Their presence ruled every corner store, and their threats silenced the community. Racism bled into their cruelty, and they enjoyed making outsiders feel small, powerless, unwelcome. Cassandra had ignored them for as long as she could. Finding solace in Shadow, the dog she rescued after leaving the military. To her, he was not just a pet but a lifeline, a loyal reminder of loyalty and love in a world that often showed neither. But the gang noticed her quiet strength. They saw a woman who never bowed her head, who never flinched under their taunts. And that, to them, was a challenge. They began circling her home, shouting slurs, mocking her, and daring her confront them. Each night, their laughter grew bolder, echoing through the streets. Still, Cassandra remained silent, knowing confrontation too soon would only endanger more lives. She had buried her past as a soldier, but the discipline never left her. Behind her calm eyes, every detail was being cataloged. Faces, voices, patterns of movement. What the gang mistook for weakness was patience. And soon, they would learn the cost of mistaking silence for fear. The first time they came close to her house, Cassandra didn't react. A group of them leaned against her fence, smoking and laughing, tossing beer bottles into her yard. They wanted her to come outside, to argue, to give them a reason. She didn't. Instead, she drew the curtains and stayed still, memorizing faces, counting their numbers, noting the time. Soon, their taunts became more deliberate. Racial slurs scrawled across her fence, trash dumped on her porch, empty threats shouted in the night. The neighbors whispered about calling the police, but everyone knew the truth. The gang had ties that made the law reluctant to intervene. Complaints went missing. Patrol cars never showed, and those who pushed too hard paid the price. Shadow became her protector in those weeks of tension. He barked whenever the gang lingered, pacing at the window like a sentinel. His presence gave her strength, reminded her of every mission where loyalty had meant survival. To Cassandra, he was more than a companion. He was family. Then came the night everything changed. They arrived in a pack, louder than usual, their laughter echoing off the cracked pavement. Cassandra felt the shift before it happened, the kind of sixth sense honed in battlefields long ago. She stood at her window as Shadow barked furiously, teeth bare at the intruders gathering at the fence. One of them pulled something from his jacket, a knife glinting in the streetlight. Another rattled the gate, whistling mockingly. Cassandra's chest tightened. She opened the door, shouting at them to leave. But before she could step onto the porch, the boy with the knife lunged a Shadow through the gap in the fence. The dog yelped once, a sound so sharp, so final that Cassandra froze. The gang laughed, retreating into shadows as quickly as they come, leaving her dog bleeding on the ground. By the time she reached him, Shadow's breaths were shallow, his eyes dimming. She cradled him, rocking on the porch like a mother with a dying child. When his last breath left him, the night fell silent, broken only by Cassandra's trembling whisper of grief. For hours she sat there, blood staining her hands, fury burning deeper than tears. They thought they had broken her spirit, but in truth, they had shattered the last restraint holding her back. Inside her mind, the soldier awakened, Every ounce of training, every mission, every shadowy memory she had locked away surged forward. She cleaned her hands, steadied her breathing, and retrieved a small box from the back of her closet. Inside lay the fragments of her old life: a pair of combat boots, a knife engraved with her unit's emblem, and photographs of soldiers who had stood beside her in battles the world would never hear about. The gang thought they had silenced her. What they had done, instead, was summon the ghost of the commander she once was. And Cassandra Hayes did not forgive. The following night, the gang returned, emboldened by their cruelty. They swaggered down the street, certain the woman inside that little house had been broken forever. What they didn't realize was that the silence greeting them wasn't fear. It was a trap. Cassandra waited in the shadows, her movements calculated, her breathing calm. She had scouted their routines, their weak spots, their arrogance. Every detail had been filed away with the precision of a soldier preparing for war. When the first one crossed her fence line, the lights in the yard cut out, plunging them into darkness. A sudden crash echoed behind them, metal striking pavement. The gang spun around, nerves fraying, and then she appeared, not in the open, but as a phantom moving between shadows. Her training flowed back like muscle memory. She struck fast, silent, efficient. A tripwire snapped one man to the ground, his scream silenced by a swift blow. Another stumbled into a chokehold he never saw coming. Panic spread through the group as they realized this wasn't a frightened woman. They were being hunted. The boy who had killed Shadow tried to run, but Cassandra was faster. Her combat boots slammed against the pavement as she closed the distance, tackling him hard. The knife he once used to kill her dog clattered from his hands as she pinned him down, her eyes burning with a fury he could not match. Around them, chaos reigned. His friends lay scattered, disarmed, immobilized, stripped of their bravado. For the first time, the gang felt powerless. They had preyed on weakness, but now they were learning what true strength looked like. Cassandra leaned closer, her voice low, steady, and colder than the night air. She didn't need to shout. The weight of her silence told them all that their reign of fear was over. By the time she stepped back into her house, the street was littered with broken arrogance. The gang had learned the truth too late. The woman they mocked, the woman they thought powerless, was a Delta Force commander, and she was done hiding. By dawn, the neighborhood was silent in a way it hadn't been for years. Word spread quickly about how the gang that once ruled the streets had been dismantled overnight. Some whispered about mass police raids, others about rival crews. But the truth was simpler and far more unsettling. One woman had brought them to their knees. The bodies of arrogance lay scattered, not dead but broken, exposed, stripped of the power they once wielded through fear. Those who escaped limped away, too shaken to ever return. And the one who killed Shadow, the gang's boldest voice, now sat trembling in custody, handed over by Cassandra herself. She had tied him up and left him for the authorities, his face battered not from revenge, but from discipline. A message that justice, not chaos, had the final word. Neighbors peeked from their windows in disbelief. For years, they had lowered their eyes, afraid to speak out, afraid to fight back. But now, they saw something they never expected. Cassandra wasn't just another woman on their block. She was protector, a reminder that true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, watching, and strikes only when it must. She buried Shadow the next morning beneath the oak tree in her yard. No words, no tears, just a soldier salute and a vow whispered in silence. He had been her anchor, and though he was gone, his loss had given her the clarity to act. Life in the neighborhood slowly began to change. Fear loosened its grip, and people walked a little taller, inspired by the quiet strength they had witnessed. Cassandra returned to her routine, once again jogging in the mornings, only now with neighbors nodding in respect instead of pity. The gang had thought killing her dog would break her. Instead, it awakened Commander who had always been there, waiting. And so the question lingers: how many others, overlooked and underestimated, carry within them the kind of power that can topple fear itself?